My brothers and sisters, there are moments in a nation's life when the silence around you feels heavier than gunfire. When people glance away in broad daylight. When conversations suddenly pause as you walk by. Those are the moments when you know something deeper is happening beneath the calm. Something concealed. Something planned. Because today's coups, they don't look the way they used to. There are no tanks rolling in at dawn. No generals announcing themselves on the radio. No gunshots in the distance. No, modern coups arrive quietly. They come dressed in diplomacy. They come disguised as partnerships. They're planned in conference rooms, whispered in embassies, and executed through paperwork, not rifles. They don't come from the skies. They come from inside our ministries. They don't march with soldiers. They walk in with suits, briefcases, and advice. And their smiles, those polite, diplomatic smiles, are not friendship. They are calculation. I have lived long enough to see how power is stolen without a single bullet fired. It always starts softly, politely, with whispers. He's too young. He speaks too boldly. He's too independent. He's unpredictable. Dangerous. But dangerous to who? Not to the farmers who feed this country. Not to the miners who dig under the burning Sahel sun. Not to the youth who dream of a better tomorrow. No, dangerous to them. To the same powers that drew our borders, shaped our policies, and still try to dictate our destiny. When I took the oath to serve this land, I knew my words would not be welcomed in Paris. I knew Washington would listen with discomfort. Because the things I spoke of, unity, independence, dignity, those ideas are considered threats in a world where Africa is expected to remain obedient. They told me politely, General, work with us. But work with us always means work for us, they said. We want stability. But their version of stability is silence. Silence from the people. Silence from the press. Silence from any leader who dares to stand tall. When I refused to bow, the storm began. Ambassadors suddenly became critics. Advisors turned into informants. Old allies distanced themselves carefully. Foreign newspapers repeated the same lines. Burkina Faso is drifting toward isolation. Isolation? Because we chose to stand on our own feet? Because we decided our land does not belong to any empire? I have seen this pattern before. They flatter you when you obey. They fund you when you follow. They photograph you when you play along. And the moment you stand up, they switch off the lights and tighten the pressure. They weaponize hunger. They weaponize debt. They weaponize the suffering of your own people to make them question you. This is the real battlefield, not of bullets, but of manipulation. Not of soldiers, but of narratives. Not of armies, but of subtle aggression wrapped in policy. But let me tell you something. They misunderstand this revolution entirely, because this movement wasn't born from one man, certainly not from me. It was born from centuries of sacrifice, from the blood of people who refused to live as slaves, even when the world demanded it. So I do not fear their whispers. I do not fear their plots. I do not fear their sanctions, because the people have awakened. And once the people awaken, no coup, no matter how silent, can succeed. Let me explain the anatomy of modern coups. The ones they will never admit to leading. Today, coups begin in embassy meetings labeled as development conversations. They start with soft warnings. General, we're concerned about the direction of your government. In the language of modern geopolitics, concern is not worry. It is a threat. Behind that concern are frozen aid packages, delayed loans, and negative headlines just waiting for permission. Then they move to the military. They invite young officers abroad. Training programs, they call them. But these programs are more ideological than tactical. They sow doubts. Is your leader truly capable? You could do much better. You deserve more responsibility. Then comes the press. Suddenly, anonymous reports flood the media. Journalists, some paid, some unknowingly influenced, repeat the same message. The government is losing control. The leadership is unstable. There are signs of authoritarianism. NGOs issue strangely synchronized statements. Think tanks publish warnings. Diplomats raise eyebrows. By the time a rumor reaches the markets and the villages, the coup hasn't even happened yet. But the justification is already complete. Then they turn to the economy. Loans get delayed. Contracts get blocked. Aid gets reviewed. Prices rise. Food becomes scarce. People suffer. And who do they blame? Not the ones pulling the strings. They blame their own government. That's how they create the conditions for removal. Brick by brick. Lie by lie. Crisis by design. And when the nation becomes desperate, the envoys arrive. With smiles. With polished suits. With terms like transition, and restoration. They say, this will calm the situation, this will bring peace. But peace bought through puppets is not peace. It is paralysis. It is submission. My brothers and sisters, today's coups are not against soldiers. They are against sovereignty. They overthrow not leaders, but movements. When they could not kill Sankara's dream, they killed Sankara. When they could not silence Lumumba's truth, they silenced his voice. And today, they use weapons of manipulation instead of bullets. They call it reforms, but it is control. They call it aid, but it is dependency. They call it partnership, but it is domination. And if all else fails, they call it a coup and pretend they had nothing to do with it. Ask yourself, why does the world panic when an African nation chooses independence? Why do headlines explode when an African leader speaks boldly about sovereignty? It's simple. They do not fear instability. They fear a free Africa, a confident Africa, a united Africa, an Africa that trades in its own currency, educates its children in truth, and defends its land without foreign permission. When I came to power, I was not their choice. I was their warning, a sign that a new generation had arrived, a generation unwilling to kneel, unwilling to ask permission to exist. And make no mistake, freedom terrifies them, not because it threatens their safety, but because it exposes their hypocrisy. Burkina Faso is not feared because of what it has. It is feared because of what it represents. If one small nation can reject the IMF, reclaim its resources, and still stand firmly, what stops others from doing the same? What happens when courage spreads? That is what they fear. The chain reaction of dignity. They must prevent our success. They must isolate us. They must fabricate lies. They must sow division. Because if Burkina Faso proves that resistance works, their entire system collapses, not through war, but through irrelevance. But understand this. Their deepest fear is not me. It is us, an Africa awakening to its power. They fear a Sahel united. They fear nations standing side by side. They fear a future where we set our own terms, not anti-West, not anti-anyone, simply pro-Africa. And that alone makes them tremble. Let me share the unwritten truth. I have seen their diplomatic cables, their think tank analyses, their intelligence assessments. They do not hide their fear. They write openly. Traore represents a dangerous new model. Young, nationalist, difficult to control. A leader who listens to his people, not to ambassadors. Dangerous because I cannot be manipulated. Dangerous because I do not fear sanctions. Dangerous because I understand that Africa cannot wait another century for dignity. But the biggest threat is not external. It is internal. Revolutions do not collapse from foreign generals. They collapse from familiar faces. Those who smile with you by day and negotiate your removal by night. Inside every ministry, every barracks, every office, there are those who whisper, not to the people, but to the embassies. They speak of loyalty, but their loyalty is bought by grants, visas, stipends, handshakes. That is the colonization we rarely discuss. The colonization of the mind. The belief that foreign praise equals progress. That foreign approval equals legitimacy. My brothers and sisters, the white flag still waves in too many African minds. But a new generation is rising. A generation that refuses polite chains. A generation that is not anti-Western. They are anti-hypocrisy. Still, the older generation always warns, be careful. They will kill you. Maybe they will. But if fear makes us silent, then we die every day long before they touch us. I would rather die standing than live kneeling. Power is a lonely mountain. I see soldiers with uncertain eyes. I hear businessmen speak of investment while meaning control. I watch leaders across Africa endorse sovereignty in public while signing deals in secret. But I cannot judge them. Fear bends even the strongest. That is why I fight differently. Not just with guns, but with truth. Truth is the only weapon that cannot be bribed or bought. To those who plot in shadows, hear me clearly. I will not surrender this land to puppets. I will not trade our dignity for funding. You may infiltrate my ranks. You may threaten my life. But you will never corrupt my purpose. Because betrayal may wound a revolution, but it cannot kill its soul. Let me explain the new weapons of conquest. They no longer use tanks or bombs. They use debt. The quiet bomb that explodes generation after generation. Loans disguised as friendship. But every signature tightens the chain. Debt is not economics. Debt is modern slavery. Media, their most precise weapon. If you refuse obedience, you become anti-democratic. If you expose their exploitation, you're anti-Western. They choose which stories define us. They turn our struggles into propaganda. Aid. Aid that feeds the poor is mercy. Aid that silences a nation is manipulation. They send rice and take your right to trade. They build schools and choose what your children learn. Aid is not always help. Sometimes it's control. Diplomacy. They come with smiles and contracts. They call you Your Excellency. Then own your economy with your signature. A handshake that hides a dagger is not diplomacy. It's deception. Fear. The last weapon. The quietest. The deadliest. Fear makes nations surrender before the battle begins. But courage changes everything. Because courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else matters more. This message is not for governments or generals. It is for you, the people. Because you are the heart of this nation and this continent. No revolution survives if the people remain spectators. If they remove me one day, and they will try, do not think the story ends there. Ask yourself, who benefits? Who returns to our minds? Whose flags reappear on our bases? If they announce that I am gone, do not mourn me. Mourn the truth they will attempt to bury. Then stand up and continue. Because a real revolution does not die with a man. It spreads through the people. The power has always been with you. I have walked your markets, your fields, your villages, and I have seen where true strength lies. In the farmers who grow food from dry soil. In the women who rise before dawn to trade. In the youth who build dreams from dust. You are not powerless. You are simply underestimated. By the world and sometimes by yourselves. Remember this. They do not fear my army. They fear your awakening. Start where you are. If you are a farmer, grow for your land, not for foreign profit. If you are a teacher, teach truth. If you are a soldier, protect your people. If you are young, create, innovate, dream, even if they mock you. Empires do not fall from war. They fall from small acts of defiance multiplied 1,000 times. Every child who learns real African history, that is an act of revolution. Every woman who refuses exploitation, that is resistance. Every man who says enough, that is the start of transformation. Remember this truth. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, we are not three nations. We are one struggle. And the chains that bind us have the same origin. Our freedom must be forged together. If they remove me, let them find 1,000,000 Traores rising from the crowd. Because a people who have discovered their voice can never be silenced again.